Hey there, welcome to Authentically Raw. I'm your host, Jamie Barris. Danielle Pashko, welcome to the Authentically Raw podcast. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited. You are a chronic illness coach and functional nutritionist. So I don't think there's probably one person that's listening that hasn't dealt with some sort of digestion issue or diseases or illnesses that are caused by things that we eat, or hasn't dealt with some sort of chronic issue, whether it's I always have a headache or neck ache or some sort of chronic illness. It seems like we all carry something. So I'm really excited about this. Could you tell us a little bit more about exactly what your titles entail?
Sure. So, I have so many titles. I've been working in this world before wellness was kind of popular, since like the early 2000s. I have a degree in nutrition. I'm a certified health coach. I once was a Reiki therapist. I did healing. I did somatic therapy, polarity therapy. I taught yoga for 20 years. I've been working in clinical practice for over 20 years, but mostly what my focus is on now, because of what I've been through with my health, and I went through a major health crisis recently, and with all the modalities that I had learned over the course of time were not helping me heal. And I always knew this intuitively, and I've done a lot of nervous system reprogramming, but it really comes down to working on your nervous system. And I ended up having so much healing through a very unorthodox way of taking care of myself. And it was actually through martial arts and using internal martial arts like Tai Chi and Qigong when nothing else was working. And I found that the therapies that do tend to work, all the restricted diets or all the biohacking and all those type of things work much better on a person who is rooted, grounded, they have their nervous system under control. And those therapies were able to take once I got heavily into the martial arts. And I had to start off very slowly because I was sick. So I was doing Tai Chi and Qigong in the beginning because I was not very well. And now I've moved into other forms. I'm doing Wing Chun Kung Fu. I've got my strength back, and it's been life-changing. So I have a little bit of a different perspective than I did even as a practitioner 2 years ago.
Okay. Wow. So many questions from what you've just said already. So first, let's start. I know you had to get your nervous system in line and things like this, but what really, what chronic conditions or illnesses, whatever, diseases, however you want to label it, were you suffering from the most?
So while I was already a practitioner and working in an environmental medicine practice, I ended up, when I was 31, I had thyroid cancer. I had Hashimoto's, and then found out I had thyroid cancer. And then once I had my thyroid removed, I ended up recovering and I was fine. And I was great for a bunch of years. And then I used to go to the Hamptons a lot because I live in New York half the year. And I must have got bitten by a tick. And this is very common with Lyme disease. Never saw it. People with Lyme or think they could have Lyme, think they need to see this bullseye rash or they need to see an actual tick on their body. I never did. So when I was having all these symptoms like blurred vision and fainting spells and just feeling dizzy all the time and terrible migraines, and I was like, what the hell's going on? I thought my thyroid cancer had come back 7 years later. It took a year to diagnose. I even did a Lyme test because I worked in a functional clinic, but they're not very sensitive Lyme tests. That's why people who don't feel well and they think they might have Lyme, retest it again because you need to really see if you have it. So I ended up retesting myself a year later. It was already chronic by that point. And I ended up doing a lot of holistic therapies and I ended up pulling out. I actually went into I would say a 90% remission and I was doing well. And then COVID came around, and this is what happens to long haulers. You hear long haulers say all the time, or have long COVID, I was healthy, I hiked, I ran, I did yoga, I did this, I did that, no prior health problems. And now look, I have long COVID. I can't walk from the kitchen to my bedroom. They probably had something. They didn't know. whether it was, for me, my Lyme disease became like Lyme on steroids when I got COVID, and I got very, very sick. But other people who may have had like Epstein-Barr or herpes or things like that, that were kind of dormant, that they may have had as a kid, resurface, and they think they were healthy, and that's why they have long COVID. So the long COVID, honestly, was the worst thing that I ever went through. And terrible chronic fatigue, the vertigo came back. I developed something called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, where I'd stand up, my heart rate would skyrocket, and I felt like I was going to faint. The room would spin. I was agoraphobic. I don't want to walk outside, and I had to work in a clinic. And here I am seeing clients, and I feel like, holy, I'm a practitioner, and like I can't even fix myself. And I was doing all the IVs. I did IV immunoglobulin, peptide therapy, all the biohacking. I have a red light in my house, cryotherapy, hyperbaric oxygen. I did everything. Nothing worked until I discovered martial arts.
Wow. And how did you stumble upon that? Were you said you were already doing yoga and things like that?
Years, and it felt good to me, but it wasn't helping my progress. And I've always been very into visualization and meditation. I've been like doing that since I'm about 11 years old. And I know how powerful that is. And for me, I wanted to visualize myself healed while I was going through this. So as a practice every day, I would visualize, and I didn't know anything about martial arts except I grew up watching Kung Fu movies. I was like obsessed with Bruce Lee. So I memorized these movies in my head. So instead of going into how am I going to get better? How's that going to happen? What is it going to look like? In my visualizations, I would close my eyes and I would watch myself doing these martial arts, like serious Kung Fu, Wing Chun, which I practice now. But I would watch myself in these movements, and it already explained to me that if I can get there, that means I'm healed. If I have that strength and endurance and balance. But then I was like, how am I going to do Kung Fu? Like I can barely walk around the block. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I ended up finding this teacher, and there's an expression, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Mm-hmm. And I was determined, except he was a Tai Chi and Qigong teacher, and he used to teach Kung Fu himself. And he had very bad chronic fatigue, and he stopped teaching Kung Fu and moved over to the softer internal martial arts like Tai Chi and Qigong. And he became fully healed. And this guy is strong, really strong. Mm. He's been doing it for 40 years. I call him my Mr. Miyagi, if anyone's seen The Karate Kid. Oh, yeah. But he was my angel. And he didn't save me from like the bad kids at school. Like he saved me from like this condition. Yeah. And I built up so much strength and life force with him that it just changed my world. That I had spent probably $100,000 between all these therapies I was doing and all these external things. And I was like, this is practically free, and I got better. So it just, sometimes you get surprised in life.
Right. So how long was this process from when you started introducing this to when you really started to see a big change?
It's really in about 3 months.
Wow.
I started noticing significant changes in my body. Like first it was the energy that really came back. And I was like, I started doing longer walks after I do sessions with him. I'd walk like a mile or two. And like, that was hard for me before, and then I started building up. And about after 4 months, he knows like my obsession with Kung Fu. I'd always tell him like, can you teach me a little Kung Fu move, during our time? Because Tai Chi is a slow form of Kung Fu. It's actually a martial form. And he'd be like, okay, I'll show you a little bit of, different things. And I would like light up, and I'd have the energy for it. And he said, I really want you to go to a Kung Fu studio, and I want you to practice Wing Chun. And this was a style that was actually developed by a nun. Believe it or not, the style that Bruce Lee does was developed by a nun. And because women get attacked very close range, so it's really a close range self-defense fighting form. Right. And I walked in, and I remember I told the instructor the first day of the Sifu, I said, listen, I have all these conditions, and I don't think I can keep up, blah, 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 blah. My whole life story. And he's just like, okay, yeah. And I could not believe how I held up in this class. And I just kept going all the time. And Now it's like my favorite thing. So I just practice Tai Chi, Qigong, and Kung Fu, and that's become my workouts. And I'm like, it's changed my life.
Wow. And I think, and I have had this thought a lot too, is it's for the elderly or people that, I mean, they just don't have a lot of physical strength or things like that. So let's talk about that, because I'm sure a lot of people kind of have that same thought, because let's face it, every time we see someone on a commercial or whatever, they're like 65 and older. Number one, it seems like, so that's kind of imprinted in our head. But, and if I'm hearing you right too, there's a lot of inner strength that's being developed. And how does that, number one, let's, get rid of the myth that it's just for elderly. I'll let you talk on that. But then, how do you really build this inner strength, and what does that inner strength actually look like?
Well, so the inner strength, when you're doing all these forms, you're moving the chi, your life force. So you're actually strengthening all of the organs in your body. And when you think about acupuncture and, traditional Chinese medicine, how they have each organ corresponds to a certain emotion, and also there are points throughout the body, the meridians. You're almost like working, you are working the meridians, you're working certain areas. So for example, especially there's something called 5-element Qigong, which we do. So we work on all of the organs like stomach, spleen, liver, large intestine. Liver is very important for detoxification, by the way, this, and gallbladder for people who are dealing with chronic conditions and they're doing all these liver cleanses. You can build up by doing this special kind of breathing with this punching movements very slowly. It's almost like resisting. It doesn't look like you're doing that much, but through the breath, you're building up your life force and you're actually detoxifying these organs. You're also, when you work the liver, you help the eyes. I was having major eye issues, and through doing this, it helped with that. When you work on the stomach, spleen, that's earth. So we were doing earth elements. Earth is grounding. So I will do a lot of 5-element Qigong when I'm in New York City, because since I'm between New York and Miami. New York, there's a great park, Riverside Park, right behind me. I stand on the grass, and I'm sure most people listening know about grounding, and I do the Qigong, and it really feels so good. And then when I'm in Miami, I go at sunset to the beach, and I do this whole series. So it really strengthens each one of the organs that you're working on. It's used medicinally, and it really, really builds you up. I mean, if you, like my teacher, if we're even play fighting and I push him, if he pushes me back, it's like power is coming out of his hands. He has so much chi. So that's what happens to you. And when people think it's for over 65, it's that's who's practicing it. But, when yoga first came on the scene, it was not mainstream. I remember I used to teach Ashtanga yoga, and I taught that 20 years ago. And Ashtanga yoga in India was developed for 12-year-old boys to stop with their racing minds, and basically to have them to calm down and relax. So they were doing this moving kind of meditation that they couldn't just sit still. But who does Ashtanga? Mostly women at equinox, right? So right. Same thing. It's just the perception. Tai Chi and Qigong have bad PR, but it is so awesome. And so I'm developing, my website's going up soon. I'm going to be teaching these forms because I think it's important for people to understand the significance of how we could heal ourselves and not have to go to a million doctors. And I'm not saying nutrition and all these things aren't very helpful. They're like a symphony. They all go together, but anyone can do this.
And I think it's important to remember, that we can infuse our Western medicine in with Eastern medicine and work together, instead of just, all one or all the other, because there are so many different modalities out there. And I think, I'm sure you reached that point, it was your breaking point. You're desperate. You just want to try whatever. But I love that you said, when the student's ready, the teacher appears, because probably an hour before we got on, that popped right into my head. And I'm going to share something that just gave me chills, because just this morning I went to an acupuncturist, and he's kind of just through pressure points, no needles or anything like this. Just, we started working on liver detox, and he wants me to, come back for like 6 consecutive weeks. And it's crazy because as I sit here, I'm like, I've got these like aches and pains in certain areas. And we even talked about the eyesight. I'm 49 now, so I've never worn glasses or anything like that. And, I've had my readers the last couple years, but even now, I mean, even sitting here, I took a couple notes. I wanted to ask you questions and I look down and it's like, oh man, I'm going to need these readers. But he even mentioned things, like the liver detox in my eyes. And because all of a sudden it's, wow. I mean, I'm aging. We're all aging.
But
Yeah.
that's wild. That's wild. And people think it's so, and people normalize it. They're like, oh yeah, I'm getting older. It's just fine to, like lose a little bit of this or have less energy here or not. Like, no, not really. And
Right.
And not at all, actually. It's just that we accept it as part of society. I mean, aging is a normal process, but there are so many things that you can just age more healthfully and also detoxify in a way that's not like, I mean, I come from the supplement world, I mean, I worked in a clinic. We had this massive dispensary and I also used to formulate supplements for doctors. So like, I mean, I would just take handfuls of stuff. I'd be like, this is for the liver and this is for the Lyme and this for this and this for my immune system. And it was like, I just couldn't keep track anymore. And I don't do all that anymore. I just don't have to.
So I'm glad that you brought that up because I want to go on the supplements next. But I want that you hit on one point that I think is it's just so accurate of we're so used to living like with all these chronic things, whether it's the fatigue, the headaches, the aches, the pain, or just feeling blah. And I don't know. I think for me, I finally got to the point too where I'm done having a high pain tolerance. Like I don't want to tolerate this stuff anymore.
Right.
It's ridiculous by the standards that, we live by. I'm incredibly healthy. My diet's off the charts healthy. I exercise, I run, I lift weights, I do yoga, like all of this stuff. I'm like, it's ridiculous. And so it's a matter of, okay, I'm hitting pause on everything and reinventing and starting over. And that is one thing with the supplements over the past month or so. I've really just through a lot of blood work and things like that, they're having me do it anyway. Stopping all of the supplements and then, maybe obviously introducing some things in, but talk to me a little bit more about some of the supplements you were taking. And yes, is it worth it? Is it not? How do we know? Because sometimes even we get our blood drawn and we're deficient in vitamin D or magnesium,
right?
Which can cause the fatigue. It can cause that. So we add those supplements and then, yes, we do feel a bit better, but speak on that.
Yeah, so I haven't written off all supplements. I was just at a desperate point. I might have been taking like 75 a day. I mean, that's the level I was taking. I had a dosing schedule, morning, afternoon, night. Like I looked like freaking like, whatever, Wilner Chemist, GNC, like better than GNC. Like all my stuff was all professional grade from like Thorne and Metagenics and, like all the best professional companies. And so I still take supplements, but I think, it's good you're stopping now. And then for anyone, get your lab work done. And that's really what needs to happen. So go off the lab work. So yes, if you're deficient in magnesium, that's when you need to supplement with it or take a vitamin D supplement or really a lot of fatigue for people. I find that, they may have low iron. So that's an issue or low ferritin or their vitamin B levels, whether it's B12, even B1. After COVID, I found a lot of people were doing tons of lab work and they had low B1. So it was like, that's the thiamine. So that's like a supplement that actually I even did thiamine injections to myself. It made me feel great. So like, I'm not saying it's not important. And even probiotics, really good for the gut, but you have to take the right probiotic, right? Because many people with chronic conditions have SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So they take the wrong form. Maybe they take lactobacillus and now it makes them more bloated and it makes their SIBO worse. They should take like a soil-based probiotic. So like everything should go by your lab and then start slowly adding things in. Like just because you see something on TikTok is like the greatest supplement ever, like doesn't mean it's for you. It's like there's all these brands. So start slow. Like, and I'm kind of like not the biggest fan of multivitamins. Some people do that, but a lot of times it can just be too much, especially if you're supplementing as well. So I just think really go by your labs. I think it's so customized and everyone's individual. So I think supplements are good, but based on your lab work, and you don't have to take handfuls like in excess. You know, these biohackers out there are like, this is what my day looks like on my, like, whatever. Okay. You know, I just think it's too much.
Exactly. And, because then some things can become toxic too. And then you've got,
Totally. It will mess up your stresses your liver. Like it does. Like you can't handle all the supplements.
right. I even noticed this was, I have to have my blood redrawn in another couple weeks because of, I had been taking some biotin.
And
Just,
infect your thyroid.
yes. And I had no
Uh-huh.
idea. She's like, yeah, are you taking biotin, by the way? This was after the fact because this messes up the thyroid. I'm like, oh my goodness. I
Yeah.
just wanted my hair to be thick.
I know. I know. So,
But then I'm like, okay, so then how is that, what is the ripple effect on that? Oh, my hair might be a little thicker. But yeah, if it messes with my thyroid, but then, oh my gosh, downstream, what's going on?
right.
And that's the thing, like you said, even TikTok or even your regular doctor says, oh, you need more of this or have that or this multi. We don't know.
And a lot of them don't know enough about supplements. I'm not knocking doctors. There's amazing physicians out there, but it's not. When I used to develop supplements for doctors, I used to give lunch and learns to physicians who were much smarter than me, but not in this area. They didn't know nutrition and they didn't know supplements. So I was explaining to them. So a lot of times they don't really know. They hear a probiotics good. They hear fish oil is good. They hear all these things are good, but like they really haven't read the papers. They don't know. They just sort of like telling you to take any brand. It doesn't work like that.
right. And now it's not just a probiotic. There's all this stuff about the prebiotics.
Right.
I think it just can be so confusing, because do I buy the ones that are refrigerated, or do I get the ones just off the shelf down the road? I mean, it's hard to tell. You're
hard.
trying to do things right, and you could be doing things totally, I don't want to say wrong, but that are not helpful. They're sometimes more harmful to our bodies.
Totally. That's why if someone really is taking this seriously and says, I want to be on a whole supplement plan, they should really work with someone who understands supplements, show them their lab work, work with a nutritionist or a naturopath or some kind of functional doctor who really gets it. And that way they can design that together and then sort of stay on that. But
Right.
just taking so many things, not really knowing and being like, oh, this is oregano. I'm making it up. An oregano oil is good for colds. It may bother you with something else. So it's just, you just can't take it all.
Right. So tell me a little bit about, because I know the whole term of, say, aligning our energy, like through different martial arts and things like that can be kind of confusing, for people, the whole energy side of things. And a lot of people just want to describe it as a kind of a woo-woo type thing. But explain a little bit about how, like the importance of like our internal balance and we're energy beings, and everything is energy. And I think it really throws people a lot. Is there any comments or anything you want to say on that?
Well, I mean, this is something that's practiced in Asia as it's completely normalized. It's not woo-woo like we're talking about quantum work, which actually I think is kind of interesting, but we're not really going there. This is actually based on, science. Doctors actually teach this type of movements in Asia. It's very common in their culture. And so when you're working with the energy, you're using breath, you're using mindfulness. A lot of times you're working with sound because sound can work. It actually, now everyone talks about the vagus nerve and how it helps our whole nervous system. But without even saying that, when I was doing a lot of the type of sounds when you're doing the Qigong, and I was like, this is vagus work, vagus nerve work, and so it works on these systems, and it's something that you just have to experience. But there's no downside. It's not like it doesn't have to be so time consuming. You can spend 20 minutes a day and feel a difference from it. But if you can do it outside while you're grounding, the energy of it, actually, it's very good to be in nature. So like if you can be around trees, I know it's cold now. I actually have like a giant grounding mat that I made for myself. Like, and it's humongous. And if it's bad weather, I just do everything on there because I feel like it keeps me really rooted. So definitely not woo-woo. If you thought that was woo-woo, like not you, but if someone did, then they would think acupuncture is woo-woo. Like it's the same principles.
Right. Well, and I think too, we live in that society where it's, the go big or go home, have to play hard. It's everything has to be so intense. And
Yeah.
I mean, because I can get sucked up in that too. I mean, being a runner my whole life, it's like, I want to run fast. I want to get a cardio workout, or HIIT workouts or all of this high intensity exercise. And for me, it's more of a mental thing to get myself to slow down. It is very challenging for me. It's just how I'm wired. I started running as a teenager and I'm, 49 now. So I've been running for decades and it's so ingrained that a lot of times when I do some of the slower stuff, I have to work so hard to stay mindful, to stay present. But when I do, I mean, it is so rewarding because I can just tell, I mean, just your mental health, your emotional health, I mean, along with your physical health. Not that, higher impact activities don't necessarily help with our mental health and things like that. But I think we live in a time where it's time to start seeking other modalities for our mental and emotional health that are not just reaching for the next quick fix. And
Well, I mean, HIIT workouts are great, but I think people who are dealing with, a chronic condition and want to kind of have some pacing so they don't burn out, or tax their adrenals too much, it's okay to do it, but it's also good to add something like this in on your off days. And, when I first started, because I was not me too. I was like an athlete when I was younger. I played basketball, I ran track and then taught yoga, but I taught Ashtanga yoga, which was like, it's not regular soft yoga. And then to not really do anything. And then I lived in Manhattan, so I'd walk like 4 or 5 miles a day anyway. So like having that kind of active lifestyle and doing this kind of slow stuff, it seems slow in the beginning, but it will allow you to be able to do the more intense workouts. Like, for example, so you're doing, the running, like your breathing capacity will be better. You'll have more strength and you won't burn out as quickly. Like I do a style of Kung Fu. I do Wing Chun, which is, it's intense where, you're sparring with people, you're hitting bags, this is like what Bruce Lee was doing. And, but from doing the Tai Chi, I don't go into a class and just like burn out right away. I'm using my Tai Chi breathing. I'm grounding. I take my time. I'm more fluid with the moments. I'm softer. I use more of like the yin energy that I never would have known how to use before. So I don't kill myself in this way. And I can walk out of a class. It's like this, where I go to a studio in New York, like it's 6 floors to walk up. Then you do a whole Kung Fu workout. And then I normally walk back to my apartment. Like I would never have been able to do this 2 years ago the way I was. So it's from cultivating these other type of martial arts, the internal martial arts, which allow me to do the external and have the strength. So for someone who's not into martial arts, is they're, they don't want to do Kung Fu, but they want to, run or, do a heavy yoga class. If they do Tai Chi Qigong and they're building up, then they can do that, because those kind of classes are good because they help you, especially for women, they help you build testosterone, strength, bone density is great. But I think the balance is important. I think like I see women in their late 40s, 50s that are like, they run every day. They're like, they're beating themselves into the ground, or they're afraid they're going to gain weight, because they're going through like perimenopause, menopause. So they just kind of think that's the right thing to do. And it's actually the reverse, because they're pumping out so much cortisol and they're taxing themselves so much. And sometimes they're like not getting enough sleep to wake up at 6 a.m. to make that class before work. And they're actually, because their hormones are so dysregulated, they're going to keep the weight anyway. Right. So you're better off working on your hormones, getting more balanced, and you'll find that you won't gain weight, and actually you'll probably get stronger. So
No,
that's
most
what
definitely. And I think that's a lot of it too, is it's that fear of, is this enough? Am I going to gain weight?
yes.
You know, because I mean
But
that's
no,
really
yes, you're right about that fear, but no, you will not. You shouldn't. That's the thing about diet, though, that people don't understand. Like, and you know this because you also work in this field, but a lot of people think that it's just about their workouts. And when I was only doing nutrition for people, most of the people that came to me were not the ones that were, eating burgers and fries and pizza all the time. They were smart. They were going to Berries and Soul Cycle and shopping at Whole Foods and working out at Equinox, but they were overeating health foods, the acai bowls, the packed smoothies. They were throwing, like, making avocado toast at every meal. Like, I'm exaggerating, but like they were overdoing it. And then they thought, oh yeah, but I'm doing these crazy workouts. Like, why am I not fit? And I'm like, these are health foods, but you're like overeating. So if you have a really well-managed diet and then you do these type of exercises while you eat really well, you'll be just fine.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's very confusing to people of, what does a healthy diet look like anymore? It's constantly changing.
Yeah,
And it's sad that it changes drastically and it's all revolves around weight loss. It drives me crazy because people jump on as soon as they hear that. Whether it's, I mean, I can remember back when I was like teenager, young 20s, it was the no fat diet. So it
yeah,
was as much bread and carbs and pasta, because there was no fat in it. Well, that killed us all because we were
totally. I do the
constantly
same thing.
all sugar. And I
Yeah,
think the gluten and the lectins, and it killed our digestive systems, and a
yeah,
lot of, I mean, infertility. There's so much stuff that happened from that. But then it goes to, keto, which is all this high protein, and now it's the fasting, or it's vegetarian, people are like, I don't know what to eat anymore. I just, and same thing, like you said, with the smoothies, for breakfast, then the avocado toast every day and all this and that. And it's like, well, wait, I thought that was a good thing. So talk to
right.
me, like, what are some different, I hate to call them diets or eating styles that you find, I mean, is it all very personalized? Is there anything that we can kind of just,
It's personalized, but there's some things to consider for sure. So I wrote a weight loss book like 10 years ago, and my practice before I had Lyme, even after I had thyroid cancer, my health is great. But after I had Lyme, I started not caring as much about the weight loss clients and all that stuff. And I cared about, how can I feel well? But even so, like, I was eating kind of a paleo Mediterranean style diet, and I was fit and in good shape, and I looked aesthetically the part. So I was like, this must be a good diet because I look, fit. Once I got COVID and my Lyme got worse, and COVID also for long haulers, it's kind of like a neurological disease that they're finding. And my brain fog and my glucose dysregulation and my blurred vision and my POTS and um, my autonomic nervous system went haywire. And I found that even eating paleo and Mediterranean, I was like, why are my, or I would have, like, the one thing I would do in the morning is maybe have a smoothie, which is not necessarily paleo, because I would do this vegan smoothie and there's some lectin, but it was low glycemic and it should be perfectly healthy. I was throwing some healthy vegetables in there and just like low glycemic berries. And I felt like crap. And I was like, well, how can I be eating all this healthy stuff and I'm having terrible health symptoms? So what I found worked really well, and I recommend to people I work with who are not feeling well, to wear a glucose monitor. So I started wearing a continuous glucose monitor. I wore it for 3 months. I discovered so much about health foods that are touted as like the best in the world that dysregulated me so badly. And during my healing, I don't stick to this diet anymore, but I was like, okay, no more protein shakes. Like, even though I like they're healthy from the best brands, but like for me, I'm like, I need real food. So I went sort of carnivore for about a month, and not just only meat though, but I would have grass-fed meat, grass-fed chicken. I could do wild fish, egg yolks, not the whites because they're inflammatory. And I really had a little bit of vegetables, which is not on carnivore, but actually it's technically a fruit. I would have squash, yellow squash and green squash, and I would peel it. And So I didn't have any lectins. I had no histamine. Those are things that really throw me off,
Can I have you
oxalate.
talk about the histamine real quick? I want to interrupt you for a minute because I've just been recently asked a lot of questions about the histamine, and I don't think a lot of people know anything about that.
Yes, a lot of people who feel crappy, who are sensitive to foods, chemicals, the environment, they walk in a nail salon, they feel bad, or, cleaning products, or they might have what's called mast cell activation syndrome, which makes the body produce a histamine response, and you react to all these stressors like a normal person could be totally fine with. So, if any, almost everyone I know who has Lyme disease or chronic illness or some kind of autoimmunity,
Yeah.
has had mast cell activation at some point in time, or they may be dealing with it right now. So, an elimination diet for myself, I do everything on myself first before I recommend it, and I saw it work so well. So I was doing the glucose monitor, I was doing this elimination, and my head was clearing up. The vertigo was lifting, and I was not feeling as bad. And I was like, wow, this is kind of interesting. So yeah, histamine can really be a problem because a lot of vegetables that are super healthy, like spinach has histamine, avocados, banana, strawberries. There's so many things that have histamine in them. People can Google a high histamine food list, and it can be a problem. And a lot of, and that's the thing, like, I work with people who want to be vegans, and that's great for a certain population. Some people feel it's better for the planet. I love animals. So, it's like, I understand I was a vegan for 10 years. I felt like total crap, and my glucose is so dysregulated. And this is before I had health issues, and I was 25 pounds heavier. But some people want to be vegan. I get it. But if you're dealing with a chronic condition, like, maybe just go a little light on some of the vegetables. Don't eat all and this is one thing that people should be careful of. They're like, oh, for my gut health, like, I want to do fermented foods, like kimchi is really good, or I want to have cabbage, or I want to have, all this stuff that's so good for the gut, sauerkraut, whatever. That will throw your histamine. It'll throw it to the roof, that you're going to be so symptomatic if you have an issue, or if you have, let's say, a bone broth, and you're like, oh, bone broth is so good for autoimmunity, and that's great for gut health. Yeah, it is for a healthy person. If you have histamine problems, that histamine and the glutamate that's in there, it's going to make your brain so excitatory that you feel like crap. So it's like, not everything that's a health food is a health food for you.
Yeah. And can it be, though, after a while? Is it best to just eliminate things, though, and then slowly introduce? Yeah.
You can slowly add back. So since this, I did this about a year ago for a month. I did carnivore, and I'm like, I can't eat like this. I need to have vegetables. So I slowly started to add things back one by one. So I was like adding back some bok choy, and I'm like, okay, I can tolerate that, and then I would add back some asparagus, and I was like, which are also like low histamine, and that did well. And then then I would have blueberries and things like that. And I found that adding things back one by one really didn't bother me. And now I just eat a really whole foods diet. I mean, it's not weird for me to have, like, I eat fish for breakfast. I might have a chicken or a steak for breakfast. Like, I just, I just want to eat real food. And I think that's important for people, like good quality, should be organic if you can afford it, or grass fed. And also regarding the histamine, like, people meal prep, I get it, but they have to be very careful, because you can get sick eating healthy foods just by it sitting in your refrigerator for more than a day or two, just because it starts to build up this histamine. So you're like, God, I'm eating something so healthy. Why do I feel so lousy? So what if you're going to meal prep? Take your food, throw it in the freezer immediately. If you freeze it and then you defrost it the night before, you're not going to have the same issue.
Good idea. I've never heard that one. Because I know that I don't do a whole lot of meal prep, but yeah, my son does, and that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, people who feel well, they probably wouldn't notice. Before I had any issues, like,
Yeah.
I could eat whatever I want, leftovers. I mean, I would eat like a roast chicken, like the whole chicken. I'd be eating it like 4 days later. Like, I will never do that now, but it didn't bother me then. Once you start noticing, you're like so in tune with your body. You're like, yeah, this is not good for me.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm trying to think if my brain is swirling with so many different things, but is there anything you want to add? any helpful information? I'm excited, honestly. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to quick go find some videos, or like, where do people,
Yeah.
I want to start trying to be like now, like right when we're off this call. I mean,
So, my website, it's called Soul Hacker. It's kind of a play on biohacking because I don't think biohacking has all the answers. I think it's going within. And it's soulhacker.com, soulhacker.com. And I have the daily soul series,
okay.
which are basically I'm not a teacher, but I'm with my teacher, and we're going through all the movements. It's a number of videos, and we're showing people how to work to help their nervous system, strength, energy. It's not just for sick people. It's for anyone who just like wants to be grounded and feel good and have more energy. But that's a good place to start.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of those things where I think you just have to start with having the discipline. And then when you start to feel better, that's when you don't need necessarily that self-discipline anymore, because you're like, oh, this feels good. I feel better.
Yes.
I mean, as you introduce things in, yeah. Any other parting comments or tricks or places that you can send people?
Just,
You have a couple books. Would you mention both of those books again?
I do have my books, but I feel like I've evolved over the past 10 years, that I'm seeing things with new eyes. And so I would say
go to your website.
go to the website.
Yeah.
And also really, really go back to basics, everybody. I think it's really important with your food. Keep it as natural and untapered as possible. Like, really cook if you can. Get out in nature. You know this, but like, grounding's real. It's real. It's helped so much. I know it's cold out right now, but those kind of things, get some sun. It's so easy to work from home. Like, so many things are free and we don't take advantage, and we can. It doesn't have to be like so expensive to heal and feel well. And I think it's a little unfair that I love the idea of wellness, but I think it's become this thing, like it's for people who have lots of money, and I want to see these things be accessible for everyone, so they can be healthy enough so they can work again. Maybe they're on disability, and then they can have the money to like do all these things and just try to enjoy yourself also, in the meantime. And
I agree. There's so much free stuff right at our fingertips.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Google search, YouTube, like websites like yours. Like, there's so much out there. And I think there's something just so powerful about being able to really make such a big difference in your own health without, not that we don't need to go see doctors and but there's so much we can do just at home and inside of ourselves. Definitely.
I wish myself now could have told myself, a few years ago, after spending probably $100,000 in bills of getting, I had a nurse come to my house giving me IV immunoglobulin therapy, and it was like $20,000-$30,000, like ridiculous. You're willing to pay anything to get better. And I'm like, really? Like, I ended up getting so much better doing this instead of doing that. So like, I don't want people to go through the same thing all over again. It's miserable. And, so yeah, we have an intuitive nature that like our body wants to heal. We just, need to go back to basics. So that's
definitely, that's definitely encouraging, right?
Yeah,
definitely encouraging. Well, thank you so much, Danielle. I appreciate this conversation.
Me too. It's so nice to meet you.
You as well. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Authentically Raw podcast. I really appreciate you. And it is my sincere hope that you get value out of each and every conversation. And I would love it if you could leave a review. It helps tremendously. Also, I'm a life coach, in case you didn't know. Visit my website at jamiebarris.com to learn more. I would love to work with you, help you get through whatever it is you're going through, or help you get to wherever it is you're seeking to go. And also, one last thing, I have a life coachy kind of book. It's called Results Daily Planning and Self-Development. You can find it through my website or head straight over to Amazon. As always, I'm rooting for you. Be real, be raw, be authentic.